Hello, hello. We'll get,
I am very excited about this, Jade. I love the title.
yay! I'm so excited. I'm excited to facilitate it today. We'll get started here shortly. I'm not gonna do the meditation because I'm not Alicia, but we are going to do your wins and your most important things.
Mhm.
Jade, I just want to tell you, I don't know why. That might be me because I logged into her account last week and I don't want to
Mhm.
mess you up. I thought I logged out. So am I messing you up?
I don't think so. I mean, everyone can hear me, see me fine, right?
Okay. I don't understand what's happening because I did log out, but I'll log back out again and come back. So I'm so
Okay.
sorry. That's
No,
totally
you're
me. That's
good.
why that's happening.
No, you're good.
Okay.
All right. It is the top of the hour, so we will get going on our wins, personal and professional wins. And I will set the timer. Hello, Sarah. I was just telling everyone I'm not going to do the meditation because I'm not Alicia, but I am going to make us do the our wins and our most important things. So we've got 5 minutes on the clock for our wins.
I'm facilitating at a different time, and I thought the same thing. Like, how am I going to do the meditation?
I wasn't even going to attempt. For anyone joining, we are doing our wins and we will do our most important goals next. Good morning, T. We are doing our wins. We've got about 50 seconds on the clock for that, and then we'll do our most important goals. And after you finish your wins, drop them in the chat. You guys know the drill. All right, now let's do our most important goals. I will set 5 minutes on the clock. Okay, about a minute left, so start wrapping things up. I also will apologize in advance. I'm single parenting 8 animals this week, so if one of them crashes our party, we'll just have to deal with it because they're kind of cray cray today. Please drop your most important goals in the chat when you have a minute. Right, does anyone need any additional time? Or are you guys ready to get started? I'm excited. All right, I'm gonna drop the workbook in our chat here, but I'm also gonna pull it up and share it. So you don't necessarily have to download it if you don't want to. I'm also gonna put it in the Telegram channel so that Mary Beth and Meg and anyone else can download it from there too. All right, let me share my screen. Can we see it? Is it good? Is it good? Cool. All right. We are going to go from the broad to the specific. I am going to be telling a fairy tale to you guys today. So that's going to be exciting. But first, we're going to talk about why do we even want to look at fairy tales and myths? Like, what's the point in it, right? Well, the thing is that fairy tales actually aren't for children. They were never intended to be for children. They were always intended to be for adults and women who were speaking to each other in women only places. So imagine, like, you know, the old spinsters, birthing rooms, you know, the women who did laundry, sewing. These were all places where women exchanged these types of stories, and they were almost always never about the actual thing. And we're gonna learn about that. But you know, when we're talking about princesses and princes, they were never really about a princess or a prince. There was always an underlying story. And also going back, you know, centuries and centuries, fairy tales and myths were actually used to translate certain spells from the witchy parts of the world, but also indigenous and people of color used it to hide secrets. And so some of these fairy tales and folk tales, like if you're familiar with the story of Brer Rabbit, which we're not going to get into today, but Brer Rabbit is actually a folk tale that has a lot of roots in African American culture, and a lot of secrets are embedded in that tale that if you're not familiar with, you would never know, right? So why look at these? Well, because stories orient us to who we are, who we want to be, and where we want to be. And I just want to read this little excerpt. I should state up front, a lot of all of this information that I'm teaching today comes from Danielle Dulski, who is a word witch. She is a writer, author, and she's one of my mentors. And she is just fabulous. So you'll hear her name several times throughout the workshop today. But patriarchal structures thrive on that's just the way it is. But right now, a little girl is reading about the old witch in the woods for the first time, and she understands the power of hidden wisdom. She knows that what she was told was not real is in fact gives shape to her world, and she is imagining a future far stranger than the ordinary reality she is told to see. So fairy tales can orient us into various paths that we want to take. But before we get into a single fairy tale, I want to take us through a few exercises on how we can begin to kind of find our own life story within a fairy tale or a myth. And this first exercise is something that is called the etymology of you. And if you are familiar with certain cultures and fairy tales, names are a big deal. Names, whether your given name or your chosen name, can actually lead you to some interesting questioning. So for this exercise, hopefully if you don't have Google up, try to pull it up or pull up your phone or whatever, because what we're going to do, we're not going to take too long on this. But what I want you to do is to consider your name. So type in, what is the etymology of Jade, for example? And I have my example here. We're going to follow this little formula. I am, etymology of your name, child of, etymology of your parents' names, now called, what your chosen name is. And you can see by my example, yep, Liz. Oh, you're on mute.
T had something and she said in the chat, and it is a little, is there a way you can enlarge it so we can just read it a little more
Yes,
clearly?
sure can. Thank you. And
Thank
the chat, I'll need to bring the chat up so I can see that as well. Thank you. Okay, let me, where is my little thingy? Is that better? Or do you need more? 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 See if I can move. There.
That's great.
Okay, perfect. Awesome.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so really this is simple. If you don't know the meanings of your name, it's super easy. Google what is the etymology of your name, your first name, your middle name, your last name, your mother's name, your father's name, if you have all that information. And you don't need to do anything with it, but what you can do after today is you can create something like I have here, which is this little poem I made out of what the etymology of all of my names are. And so you could do some fun things that are fairy tale directed when you are looking at words. So I'm going to give you guys, let's do 2 minutes. I know that's not a whole lot of time, but we have a lot to get through. And you can take this and do this later too. Is that a question, Megan? Okay. All right, 2 minutes. Okay, wrapping up. I know, again, that's not a lot of time, but come back to it after today. Now, what's the point of this, right? Cool, we know the etymology of our name. Well, what you can do then is take this to searching for a story that includes the etymology of your name. So for example, going and searching, what stories include the stone jade? What stories include the color jade? Okay, Mark, dedicated by Mars and warlike. There are already 1,000 stories I can think of that have Mercury, for example, the god Mercury and the astrology of Mercury is ruled by Mars and warlike. So there's already a lot of different branches that you can go just from this one exercise of thinking about where your name comes from. Now this one is your life initiations. So in a fairy tale, as we'll know, as we'll see, there's always a death of the old way, an initiation. And when we look back at our life, we all have some of these initiations. They don't need to always be these big, profound, initiations. They can be, but they don't have to be. But when you look back, think of the experiences in your life that have felt like something has died, something has gone so that something new can be. Again, these initiations, they might be chosen. You might have chosen it. They might have been put upon you. Usually they're both in a way, I like to think. And they might be bitter, poisonous. They could be sweet. Marriage is a good example of a very sweet initiation, right? For some of us. But what I want you to do is think about three. Think about three of these big life initiations that have happened in your life and write those down. Again, we're going to take just like 2-ish minutes. You can come back to this after, but without getting into the depths, the pain or the bitterness of those memories, just write them down. Things that could be considered your initiatory events. All right, 2 minutes on the clock. All right, does anyone need any more time with this one? All right, now you might have guessed why we're going through some of these. Each of these are exercises, and then I'm going to tell you how to connect them to the fairy tale. So with this one, initiatory descents are, like I just said, imperative to fairy tales. And what you can do with this information is find a fairy tale or myth that mimics the initiatory event that you kind of want to explore. So for example, if you are someone, I've done this exercise many times with folks who have lost a parent very early on. We know in fairy tales, there's often a parent who is missing. There's usually a mother or a father that has died very young. And that really marks you. And so what you do with this exercise is, again, take your initiatory event and search for a fairy tale. Fairy tales that include loss of a parent, fairy tales that include, abduction, if that was a crazy initiatory thing in your life. All of these different initiatory stages are important to be witnessed. And often in fairy tales, you can find that witnessing. And by that, I mean almost fairy tales almost act as a sort of mirror back to you. Hansel and Gretel, if you have a very close sibling, these sibling stories and fairy tales often mirror back a lot of the same feelings and emotions that come in with your siblings. So this is the initiatory exercise that you can then research and go find with your fairy tales. Now, this is one of my favorite exercises, and this is called You as the Character. And I want you to think about the times in your life that you have felt fully and completely within your power. Like the times that you have felt the you-iest you that you could ever feel. And like, you're like on top of the world. And you're like, this is me. I am fucking awesome. Like that's the type of experience I want you to think of. And when you think of that, who comes up as a character? And this doesn't have to be a fairy tale character. It can be a character, a fiction, like a book character, movie character, film character. It could be an archetype. And as an example, mine is when Dumbledore is giving one of his like epic monologues, which is, pretty on brand for me. But it also confirmed that I really resonate with the character, the archetype of the crone sage wisdom giver type of character. And again, this we'll talk about why we're doing this exercise here in a minute, but 2 minutes. Again, you might not need that much time, but think of that, just that fully felt feeling of like being yourself. And then what character does that remind you of? Okay, do you guys all have it? Who your character is? So what we're going to do now, before I get into what we're going to do with this, we're going to go to the next one because they kind of go hand in hand. So I want you to imagine your inner warrior. Your inner warrior is the part of you that has been training for something your entire life. Now, not all of the trainings will have been voluntary, kind of like the initiations, but they've all been necessary. So start considering all of the trainings, whether that's chosen or not, the preparations, the education, the books, the life lessons, the learnings you've experienced over the course of your life. And again, at the time, you might not have known that's what you needed. But when you look back at the trajectory, almost everything that you have done in your life has kind of led to this point. Your inner warrior has been sending you teachers and giving you opportunities to learn. And when you think back through all of those up till now, what story has your inner warrior been preparing for your entire life? Has it been to be a mother? Has it been to get your confidence back? Has it been to fully realize your artistic dreams? What is it that your inner warrior has literally been working his butt off for your entire life? And as an example, if you combine your character with your inner warrior training, that might also orient you to what that story is. So if I combine my character with all of the trainings, I see that I have been training my entire life to help others find their stories, to find their wisdom and potential through storytelling. And so that really orients me to kind of what all of those trainings, whether or not I knew about it or not, has led me to here. So I want you to think about that. Does anyone need more time with this one? Okay, as you might have guessed, what do I want you to do after you've kind of come up with your results here? I want you to search. I want you to look for stories, Google. Let's say that for example, mine fits into the hero's journey. So fairy tales that have the hero's journey, which will be like 1,000 of them. So that's not a very great example. But you could search for let's say your training has been preparing you for motherhood. I can already think of 3 or 4 different fairy tales, the Mother Goose, the Ugly Duckling. There's so many different ways that you can find your entry point into fairy tales. And that's why I wanted to do these 3 different exercises, 3, 4 exercises, because I want you to see that there are so many different ways that you can search for a fairy tale based on your own life. That's how you connect it, right? So before we get into the storytelling aspect and our part 2, I want to stop, and I just threw a lot at you and we went through it really quickly because I really packed this full today. But I want to stop. Questions, thoughts, anything surprise you about what's come up? Saskia.
Can I just ask, sorry, I came in a little late, so I was jumping in late, but can I just ask you to go over them again, just really quickly? Make
Yep,
sure
yep.
I've got them all.
Yep. So the first one is called the etymology of you. And essentially what you're doing, hi, John Denny, we're going through the workbook. I'll put it in again so that you can have it and follow along. So this is looking at your name, Saskia, like the origins of your name. And then when you are done, like I put mine in a poem, but you of course do not have to do that. But what you do with this then is take that information and search for any stories, fairy tales, myths that might come up and orient you towards something you're curious about. You know, Jade is actually, I didn't know this, but it's in the story The Emperor's New Clothes, one of the old versions. I would have never known that if I hadn't done this exercise and learned that. So you might be surprised. The Island of the Lime Tree, I had no idea that was what that name meant. And so then I went down a rabbit hole with that. So, you know, this might seem innocuous, but it actually can lead you down some really interesting rabbit holes. And especially like, for example, Lisa, God is my oath. My mom is the least religious person you will ever meet in your life. And for her name to mean God is my oath is just freaking hilarious. And when I told her that, she was like, yeah, no. Mm-mm. And so it's just very funny that like to think of what your namesake means deeper than my parents named me this. And of course it might not, like for here, the name Hankus, that's my maiden last name, the son of. Clearly I am not a son of, but I am a daughter, but my dad I don't have any blood brothers. So end of the line, you know, so it's very interesting, right? So this is one. Two is excavating your life initiation. So these are those big moments in your life where something died and something new came anew. And these often lead us towards those like pivotal moments in our life, whether it's having a child, getting married, your first bleed, you know, all of these different life initiations lead us to different introspective ways of looking at our lives and stories. Then we have you as a character. And this is the one where it's like, where do you feel the youiest you in your life? Like, where do you feel the most powerful, the most aligned with who you are? And then who does that remind you of? Like a movie, a character from a movie, a film, a book, whatever. It can literally be anything. It doesn't have to be a person or a character. It can be like an archetype, like I am the mother or I am the rebel. And that can also lead you to find stories that are related to who you identify with. Thanks, Megan. And then your inner warrior story, which is all of the trainings, all of the kind of life lessons that you've been through in your life that have led you to where you are today. What if you had to sum all of those lessons up? What story do you think it's been preparing you for?
Thank you, Jade. That was beautiful. Yeah. And I love this, by the way.
Yay! Awesome. So any other questions, thoughts before we kind of move on? No? All right. So I kind of talked about this a little bit. Why look to Miss Fairy Tales for professional, personal, and spiritual growth? Well, as Danielle says, story keeping is tending and sharing a story for the purpose of transforming self and others. I'll say that again. For the purpose of transforming self and others. And so if you are looking for something that is going to orient you towards your next possibility in life, a story can really do that when you find the right one. And again, they were never intended for children to hear and to hold. And this is directly from Danielle's book. These tales belong to us, the wild-hearted ones who know a thing or two about magic. The old stories are alive and full of spirits. An old story is immortal, a shapeshifter that swallows the many poisons of a time and spits back the exact medicine we need to heal. There are the stories that refuse death and that will live on the teller's tongue forever. Now, we tend to dance around our stories, our life stories, never quite grasping them until you work with one for a very long time. So I want you today, as you're going through and you're listening to this tale and after today, if you do some more research, I want you to understand that you're not going to come up with it right away. You're going to dance around it. You're going to be like, oh, maybe Cinderella, maybe Rapunzel, maybe this. And you're never going to really quite be like, that is the life story, because that's the point. And you want to hold that tension It can almost feel a little electric, right? Storytelling is about passion. And so I'm going to go out there on a limb and say sometimes when you're reading and listening to these stories, you want to feel almost that buzz you feel like when you're getting hot and bothered, right? Like, oh, I just love this story. Oh, I just love knowing about this thing. That's the kind of energy that you want to feel when you know there is a story that is coming for you. And here's the thing is today I'm going to tell a story and all of you are going to feel very differently about it. Some of you may be like, yeah, not my jam. And that's okay. Some of you might be like, ooh, yeah, this one is it. And you want to hold that tension because there's something there. Something is calling to you. And that's the point of these stories is not to Disneyfy them, not to give you a happy ending, not to give you this clean version. It's to awaken something within you. Sometimes that what is awakened is that like poison, like, oof, I don't like that. Sometimes it's the passion of, yes, I love this. And sometimes it's simply a, this seems really familiar. And that is what kind of leads you to do your next step, which is to either read it again, listen to it again, research it again, or kind of let it go and move on. So before I start, before I start actually telling the tale, I want to talk about how we meet a fairy tale because in the world of myth tending, it's actually the psychology of a fairy tale is on 3 levels. So we meet a fairy tale at this first level, which is what we would all expect, right? We read Cinderella and we think we identify with Cinderella, perhaps. And we see, oh, I'm kind like her, or I'm I want to meet my prince like her, whatever. However you identify with the main character, that's kind of that first basic level. That's what we learn as children, right? Like, oh, this character is like me, or I am like this character. Then we identify parts of the story and the characters as our inner psyche and world, which means that actually in fairy tales and myths, we are every character. We are Belle. We are the beast. We are the father. We are every character in a story. And this middle level is really where you get the juiciest magic from because you start to explore and excavate. How am I like the beast? How am I holding something hostage that isn't mine to hold? Right? That's a profound question. And it doesn't even have to be, it can be as simple as my confidence. I'm holding that hostage because of a wound that isn't really mine to carry, right? So when we look at ourselves through the psyche of all the characters, we really start to see the underlying levels of these stories. And then the third level is we identify it as the collective, right? So in the greater world beyond ourselves, who is Cinderella in our great world? Who are the Cinderellas? Who are putting themselves last in order to serve other people? Who are the wicked stepmothers or the wicked stepsisters in the wider world? The absent father, the grandmother, the godmother. Who in this greater world embodies these types of archetypes? That's also a lens in which we meet fairy tales. I prefer to stay in the level 2, but it can be really fascinating if when I'm doing a pop culture analysis piece, I'll usually weave through these 3 and end up on the 3 because, well, I'm writing for the greater world. But when I like to do my personal analysis, I stay in the second realm where every character is me. Is there any questions about this? This is kind of yes, Liz.
This is a really interesting exercise. I've really enjoyed it. What's interesting is, okay, so one of the stories that came up for me is either Merida from Disney Princess Merida, who is clumsy and whatever, but goes against societal norms, and then Little Red Riding Hood. So I guess what you're saying is to dig into Little Red Riding Hood using her wits to navigate and survive. But that means you're also saying that I need to look at myself as the grandmother and as the wolf. And like, so is that also what I'm doing too, looking at the whole story?
Yes, and actually you're ahead of me because the tale that we're reading today, that I'm reading for you today, is called The Red Hood. So we're doing Little Red Riding Hood as the story.
So I think that's what's fascinating. So to go back and look and see, is it asking myself how I show up that way, or how am I guess I'm trying to understand how to dig into each of those other characters in the story.
Yeah, and well, we'll kind of, let me come back to that because I think
Okay, great.
I'll answer that in our next
Perfect.
thing. But that's a really good question, and that's typically the question that we all have to we have to ask ourselves when we're in that second, like, how am I like this person, or how am I not like this character, right? Any other questions before I dig in? I want to make sure we get through this. Okay, so before experiencing this tale, I want you to consider the image of a haunted woodland, right? Haunted woods. And again, you can wait to do this till later, even though it tends to work better when you do it before. So if you could really quickly, how do you envision your underworld forest? Like, what colors? Is it dark? Are there creatures? What time of day is it? What season is it? How does this haunted woodland make you feel? Are you scared? Are you curious? What is it bringing up? And if this woodland, this haunted forest, could speak to you, what would its greatest lesson be? And I know you have no context yet, but that's the point. Like, what if there's a message here that's coming up, what does the image of this forest teach you right now in this moment? Is it not to be afraid? Is it to be curious? Is it to go into the forest? All right. Keeping in mind the 3 ways that we meet the tales, I invite you now to close your eyes and bring your entire self to be present for this telling. This is The Red Hood, and this is Danielle Dulsky's version. Once in a time that was remembered, forgotten, and now remembered again, there lived a dangerously curious little girl. She woke at dawn, hungry for mystery, full of questions, and with wild eyes that saw everything as if for the first time. A rebellious child she was, and her mother and grandmother often worried for her safety. With each passing year, the girl was given more and more rules and responsibilities to live by. Don't go outside after dark. Don't tell anyone your name. By day, stick to the road, and when in doubt, run, run, run. On her 7th birthday, her grandmother stitched her a hood of bright red, the color of magic, sacrifice, and blood. The hood was meant to protect her, and the girl wore her red hood every day and every night. Over the years, she became known as Little Red Hood, and her first name was forgotten. Around the time of Red Hood's first bleed, her grandmother fell ill. On a late summer morning, she woke to find her mother preparing a basket full of bread, wine, and carefully foraged medicines. You are to take this to your grandmother, Red Hood, her mother said. Stay on the road, speak to no one, and go as quickly as you can. Red Hood, obviously worried for her beloved grandmother, nodded, took the basket, and hastened to the road. Never before had she been allowed to go to her grandmother's house all on her own. The way was haunted and hidden, and yet she knew it well, and by noonday she was nearly there. Proud of her timing, she slowed her pace. The late summer sun was casting golden beams through the trees. The crows crackled in her direction, and the wild flowers were in full bloom. Suddenly, the basket felt quite heavy, and Little Red decided to rest at the edge of the road. Only then did she see the wolf. "Oh, my dear child, what a lovely red hood you have!" The gray beast stepped out from behind a wide-trunked elm tree, white fangs gleaming. But Red Hood did not know to be afraid. "Thank you," she replied. "My grandmother made it for me." "How nice," the wolf crooned. "And where are you off to all alone?" "Well, I'm taking medicine to my grandmother. She's ill and too weak to leave her house," answered Red Hood. "Oh, that's terrible news, my dear, just terrible. May I ask, where does your grandmother live?" The wolf crept closer, head bowed, eyes fixed on Red Hood. "Actually, it's not far from here. Her house is where the oaks and the hazel grow together." The wolf clicked his tongue. "Ah, yes, I know it." She could see the full size of him now, and her heartbeat quickened. The wolf went quiet, pensive, and plodding, and Red Hood thought she'd better be on her way. "Wait," the wolf said as she stood, moving to block the road. "Do you see those pink flowers growing over there? A tea brewed from them will heal any ailment. Why don't you go and gather some? It won't take long." I better not. Good day to you." Red Hood curtsied and tried to move around the massive creature. "But don't you want your grandmother to get well?" Red Hood swallowed. "Of course she did. What's a few more minutes? Go on, gather some of the flour. She'll be healed by morning, I promise." Red Hood pursed her lips, sighed, and agreed. "All right, I guess I do want her to get better as quickly as she can." The wolf smiled a great sharp grin. "Good girl. Well, I must be going. I hope your grandmother heals swiftly." With that, the wolf was gone, running off into the shadows, and Red Hood left the road to gather the flowers. Lost in her work, she quickly became, until hours passed and it was dark. "Oh no!" Red Hood saw the sky turning amber behind the trees. She ran back to the road, thinking all of her mother's rules and the fact that she had broken them all. Breathless, she made it to her grandmother's house before the moon rose. The door was wide open. "Grandmother?" Red Hood called, standing at the threshold. The house usually smelled of clove and rosemary. Today it smelled of blood. "Grandmother, are you all right? I've brought you some medicine." "Oh, wonderful!" a rough voice howled from her grandmother's bedroom. "Grandmother, is that you? You sound awful." "It's me, dear. I'm just so sick. I'm not myself." Red Hood swallowed, sensing something was amiss. "Did you happen to bring any wine? I'm so thirsty. Go on and bring me a glass. I'm too weak to get out of bed." No one had taught Red Hood what the twisting in her belly meant. So she ignored the warning and poured the glass of wine. As Red Hood tiptoed to the back of the house, she could hear breathing coming from her grandmother's room. "Grandmother." "Yes." "Grandmother, your eyes." "All the better to see you, my dear." She stepped closer, squinting into the shadows. "Your ears." "All the better to hear you, sweet child." Red Hood took a last step forward, and so close to the bed she could see that the wolf from the road wearing her grandmother's dress. She knew the wolf must have eaten her grandmother, and she knew now her life was in danger. "Your teeth!" she wailed as loudly as she could, and a hunter passing by heard her scream. "All the better to eat you with, my dear." The wolf grabbed the girl and devoured her whole, just as the hunter burst into the room. The beast snarled, crouched, moving to strike the man. But the hunter's blade had been drawn. It pierced his throat, and the wolf fell down dead. Acting quickly, he carefully made a shallow cut down the wolf's belly, and Little Red Hood crawled out, gasping for air. Together, the girl and the hunter dug through the beast's swollen belly and pulled out the grandmother. The hunter tried to revive her, but to no avail. "I'm so sorry, she's gone." Red Hood, full of rage that this beast had tricked her, refused the hunter's words. "No, she's not." The girl pressed her lips to her grandmother's and exhaled long breaths into her mouth. She refused to quit, and finally, her grandmother coughed and opened her eyes. And they lived happily ever after, made so, as we all are, by gratitude and grief. And that is the story of the Red Hood. And we have very little time left, but after experiencing this tale, we've arrived at the ever after. What do you still wonder? What's missing? Now, your question might point to something that you feel is wrong with the story, a hole in the plot, a vital piece of wisdom. Just try to think of what question is still lingering. And after you name that question, think about, how is this the very question of my life? In other words, how is your question about the story actually a question about your life right now? So for example, when I did this exercise with Danielle, the first thing that came to mind is, how can you mistake a grandmother for a wolf? And then I realized that there was someone else in my life who had presented as someone else and turned out to be someone very different, and realized that was the connection, right? How could Little Red Hood not understand that that wasn't her grandmother? But how could I have not seen that this person was not who they actually said they were, right? So there's the level of connection right there. And then when you look at your message that the haunted forest gave you before we started the tale, how does that message answer your question? You might be surprised. Maybe the question was, how can I, back as I was just saying, how can I discern between the wolf and the grandmother? And my message from the woodland was, be curious. So how can I discern between them? Be curious. They often work in tandem and you don't even realize it's happening. But there is often a parallel. Okay, so this is an exercise for the road. I'm not going to go through it. It is called the Fairy Tale Council. Everything that you need to know if you want to do it is there. Basically, you go through, let me go to my example. You go through, I chose cards, but you can choose any type of fairy tale. And you kind of do some of the same exercises we did before. You look to the character or the archetype to answer whatever question you have. So I asked the question, what do I need to know about bringing forth my work into the world? These were the cards I pulled. And then these were the messages. And for the end, here was what all put together, what that message was. So this is for the road. We're not going to do it. And we only have 2 minutes left, but does anyone have questions, thoughts? Did I answer your question, Liz, about how you're supposed to look at the wolf and the grandmother and all of the different characters?
Yes, I thought when you said, how am I like the other characters? That was the question I was looking for.
Okay,
So thank
there
you.
you go. Awesome. Any other questions, thoughts? T.
I needed fairy tales with a bit more mischief with them. So if you're like that, because I ended up deciding I am the love child of the blue fairy and coyote, Native American stories, and the early African American stories have characters with more mischief in them. And I realized that looking at those stories, they've been training my inner warrior to resist fascism without losing compassion, joy, or mischief, which is kind of what we need in these times. So, I mean, if you need a little more mischief, mischievous heroes, those are good places to look.
Mischief equals trickster. So if you type in trickster stories, you're going to get a lot. If you're someone who loves to read, like if you're a big reader, search trickster Anansi, Anansi. Anansi is a West African spider deity, and she often is very trickstery, mischievous. He is often trying to steal the stories from other people, and he like steals all the stories from the gods so that he can hoard all the stories. He wants like everyone's story, and I'm like, oh, that's so me. Like I would just steal everyone's story if I could. So type in Anansi if you want more trickster. Coyote is another one, trickster. Fairy tales are trickster. You think they're one thing, and then they turn out to be another. There's actually, I'm working on a fiction story right now where in Red Riding Hood, they actually sent her to be caught by the wolf. She was too rebellious, too mischievous, and so they send her literally to be caught by the wolf. And so you can subvert it too. Okay, we're at time, but if anyone has any lingering questions, thoughts, comments, use Telegram, send me a message, send me an email. I'm here. I love talking about stories, and I hope that this was helpful for you guys. All right.
Thanks, Jade.
Thank you guys.
Jade,
Have
yeah.
a wonderful rest of your day. Bye, guys.